What's going on, guys? Sparrow here, and before we get into this video, I just want to take a moment and say thank you to every single one of you. When I started this, story, it was almost 2 years ago, believe it or not, but here we are. This is the finale, and I believe you guys are going to love this. It took forever to put together, so I really hope you enjoy it. And also, stick around at the end, for there are some notes that I do want to give to most of the VAs of the project. Some are excluded due to certain reasons. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoy the finale, and without further ado, here it is. Unmarked, Part 8, the finale. Please enjoy. The forest was dark and quiet, making it hard for Coltstein to navigate through the thick trees. The mist that coated the forest floor made it hard to navigate as well, seeing it didn't feel like normal mist. It was composed of something thick, and each time Coltstein touched the thick content, it made him feel weak and sick. It wasn't easy to avoid, seeing it covered most of the forest floor. So each step Coltstein took made him feel sick and uneasy. The further he walked, he swore he could hear the distant voices of children. The sounds were of screaming, begging, and at some points, sinister laughter. Coltstein remembered that the pony he had spoke with had said that Annie used past victims as a shield. More than likely, he was hearing the sounds of Annie's victims, causing him to quiver and sweat. He wiped his sweat away, walking deeper into the desolate forest, hoping to come upon something soon. The atmosphere of the forest grew heavier as he reached an opening. It was a small pond of what looked like water, and as much as he wanted to take a drink, he knew that the water was only a manipulation. There was no sign of life near the pond, but as he walked closer, he could see something under the water. He drew closer until he was at the edge of the pond, only to see a young pony within the water. She seemed as if she were sleeping peacefully, until her eyes suddenly burst open, revealing blank eyes. She levitated from beneath the water until she was floating just above the pond, staring at Coltstein. The pony remained still for a minute until she suddenly opened her mouth, revealing sharp, jagged teeth, and released a roar that caused Coltstein to panic. The pony lunged forward, colliding with Coltstein and knocking him back into a tree. Coltstein attempted to stand back up, noticing the pony lunging toward him once more.
Coltstein!
He regained his balance quickly, searching for any sort of defense against the charging pony. Coltstein could not spot a single thing, and immediately just moved out of the pony's line of fire and ran around the area. The pony collided into a tree, hitting hard and knocking down the tree, which turned into dust. The pony grew angry as Coltstein continued to ponder his options while running from the pony. So much was going on at once that he couldn't think straight, and he was running out of breath. He finally came to a stop, noticing the pony charging at him once again. He quickly dodged the pony, causing the creature to knock over another tree, turning to dust. He couldn't just keep dodging and running. There had to be a way to kill this thing. That's when his mind spiked, looking at the small pond, realizing that was his defense.
Water. The water works as a killing mechanism,
he said as he ran into the water, making noises to attract the creature. The creature caught sight of him and immediately lunged toward him again. This time, Coltstein took a deep breath and just as the creature was just about to make contact, dove under the water. Coltstein dodged the creature again, and before it could fly out of reach, he grabbed the pony's back hoof. Coltstein quickly dunked the creature under the water, hitting the floor of the shallow water hard. The hit stunned the creature, giving Coltstein just enough time to grab the creature's head and smash it against the side of the pond. Coltstein did not hold back and continued to smash the creature's head against the pond's side until the creature went limp. The creature dissolved into nothing but a black muck, revealing an envelope. The envelope was clearly important, so Coltstein quickly grabbed the envelope and rose above the water, taking in deep breaths. He walked onto the side of the pond, examining his newfound clue.
I wonder what's in it,
said Coltstein, using his teeth to rip open the envelope. The envelope ripped open with ease, revealing two things, a folded up paper and a key. He figured he should see what the paper was, seeing there was no doors around. He carefully unfolded the paper, revealing a note of some sort.
My name is Sally. I am 8 years of age and was taken from my family. All I saw was a light before I was taken. My vision was only blurred lines of faint lights and 2 red eyes before I fell into eternal darkness. All I heard was a silent scream before my lungs were engulfed and my body went limp. It's cold here, but I adapted after 2 years. I want my mommy and daddy. Somebody please save me. I want to go home. Our eyes are blind and manipulative. Look from a different perspective, and you'll find your way. Be warned. If you shall continue, light will be your key. I can finally move on. Sally.
The note had Coltstein baffled as he read over it again, trying to come to an understanding.
Light will be your key. If light is my key, then what does this key mean?
The key was a gold skeleton key, much like the one he used to enter the restricted area of the library. However, the restricted area was not real, only a manipulation of the mind. Coltstein's ears immediately perked, knowing what the key represented.
The key I used at the library was able to open the door to a malicious dimension that doesn't exist. And the note stated that our eyes are blinded and manipulative. This world I'm in is a manifestation, and this key opens a new door to a new world. However, if light is my key, where can I find light?
Coltstein thought hard about the question. If the world he was in was a manipulation, then darkness must be light.
Bingo! Now, the rest of the statement. Look from a different perspective, and you will find your way.
Once again, he was confused, scratching his head.
Think hard, Coltstein. Go back to the note.
He looked over the note, reading and examining it carefully.
Before my lungs were engulfed, her cause of death, more than likely, was drowning. So maybe if I look from Sally's perspective when she died, I'll be able to see what my eyes are blind to.
Coltstein had no other choice, so he took the key, stuck it in his pocket, and made his way into the water, trying to remember where he saw the filly lying in the water. He stood in the middle of the pond and slowly dumped himself underneath the water. Under the water, he settled himself into the same position as the filly. Then he closed his eyes. Immediately, the sound of screaming erupted underneath the water. As he opened his eyes, only to see a faint light and bubbles. 2 hooves were holding him beneath the water, and he couldn't breathe. The hooves continued to hold him under the water, until he felt water enter his lungs, and the faint light fell to nothing but darkness. Coltstein closed his eyes again, wanting this madness to end as the silent screaming faded. Some sort of invisible force thrusted him above the water as he opened his eyes, breathing heavily. He was surprised, noticing the dark gloomy forest he had been in before had changed into a regular forest, with the sun shining through the trees.
Did I just witness Sally's death?
His mind was baffled as he pulled the key out of his pocket, noticing a gem embedded within the key's grip.
The light will be your key,
He said as he turned the tip of the key toward the sun, glowing through the gem. Coltstein watched as the sun's beams illuminated through the gem, creating some sort of guide. The beams pointed in different directions throughout the forest.
The key is a guide. My guide to the next clue.
Coltstein noticed a beam from the gemstone directing him to go straight.
It's not over yet. If anything, it's just begun.
He said, following the beam deeper into the forest. The key's guidance had led Coltstein into a much more tolerable section of the forest, away from the thicker areas. He was relieved, but knew that now was not the time to let his guard down. He was still in Annie's mind, and had many more obstacles to pass, so he remained on guard, using the key's directions. Coltstein had wondered if any pony had made it this far, because the pony he had spoken to had said that all attempts had failed. Was he the first to pass the first obstacle? Or was it the next obstacle that doomed all the others? As he walked further, he realized that the sun's rays were starting to get blocked by thicker trees. It wasn't much longer before the sun had completely vanished, immediately causing his only guidance to be diminished. It was clear that he was nearing his next challenge.
It's never that easy,
He said, sticking the key in his pocket. The key had led him to a dirt path with only one direction: straight. Coltstein continued to follow the dirt path until he came to a crossroad, both paths being exactly the same. There was no sun to direct him, only two trees. Coltstein wasn't sure what to do, until he saw a keyhole within the bark of the middle tree. Thinking the obvious, Coltstein grabbed the key from his pocket, placed it into the keyhole of the middle tree, and opened a secret compartment. Within the compartment was an envelope and another skeleton key. The key was silver, with a sad face and happy face forged into opposite sides of the key's grip, and no other specific properties that Coltstein could see. The envelope was sealed, so Coltstein ripped it open with his teeth, only to see a folded up paper and a coin with a sad face and happy face on opposite sides of the coin, just like the key's grip. He decided to investigate the folded paper first, so he unwrapped it with ease and read it slowly and carefully.
One tree speaks the truth, one speaks lies. The coin answers one, but not the other. The key shows you the truth, but your eyes lie. Use both instinct and trust to pass, or you should never proceed. If you proceed, remember well, a witch can only exist in hell.
Coltstein was confused, until his thoughts were interrupted by a voice coming from just in front of him.
Who dares to wake me from my slumber?
Coltstein could not figure out where the voice was coming from, so he spoke out.
Who's there?
It was quiet, until Coltstein finally saw where the voice was coming from.
I said it. No, I said it,
argued the other tree. For a moment, Coltstein thought that he might have been dreaming, but he knew this was not a dream, considering the pain he felt in his back from his encounter with Sally.
What's it to ya?
Spoke one of the trees. Coltstein couldn't tell which tree was speaking, until he noticed their expressions. The tree on the right had a happy face, while the one on the left had a sad face.
One tree speaks the truth. One speaks lies.
Coltstein understood what the note meant. One tree speaks the truth, while the other speaks nothing but lies. This was a test of trust and instinct. However, what did the coin have to do with it? Coltstein read over the note as the two trees continued to bicker at each other.
The coin answers one, but not the other.
He thought hard, then remembered that there's two sides to a coin. It was clear to him. A coin flip would determine which tree he would question, but which one was telling the truth. Coltstein decided to interrupt their bickering.
I don't mean to be a bother, but I need to know which path leads to safety.
The safe path is my path.
Spoke the happy tree.
No, he's a liar. My path is the safe path.
Coltstein expected this to be his answer, so he knew that he wasn't going to get anywhere by asking simple questions. He had to follow the riddle if he was going to get anywhere.
One of you is telling the truth, while the other is lying. According to this riddle, I can only ask one of you for the answer.
That is right. You shall flip the coin you possess and determine your destiny.
Coltstein nodded his head, placing the coin in his hoof and tossing it into the air. The coin remained airborne for a few seconds before finally landing in the soft dirt. It landed with a happy face visible, so Coltstein picked the coin up and proceeded to the happy tree.
Again? You always win!
Exclaimed the sad tree.
Quiet down, I'm talking.
Yelled the happy tree. The sad tree just shrugged as Coltstein approached.
You may ask one question only, but be warned, Pony, I may have a happy face, but I may or may not speak the truth. I am a tricky tree,
stated the happy tree.
One question,
said Coltstein, thinking hard of the question to ask the tree. He had only one chance to tell if this tree was lying or telling the truth. So he looked at the riddle again, closely.
The key shows you the truth, but the eyes lie. I must have used this key for something, otherwise it won't be there. And since this isn't a malicious world, and my eyes can see reality, it's not a trick.
Where I use the key is clear, and the key shows me the truth. So I have to use the key for the truth. What should I ask the tree though? It has to be something to give an advantage. So, what can give me an advantage?
Coltstein thought hard as he read further into the riddle. As he read on, something did catch his eye, and he immediately figured out what would give him his advantage, where each path led.
Okay, I have my question. Where does your path lead?
An unusual question, Pony, but since you asked, I must answer. My path leads to heaven.
This means the other leads to hell.
The riddle immediately made sense, because the last part of the riddle matched up.
If you shall proceed, remember well, a witch can only exist in hell.
Coltstein had solved the riddle. But was the tree telling the truth, or was it lying through its barked teeth? The next step was to use the key to figure out the answer. The silver key showed the truth, so it should be simple enough. Coltstein grabbed the silver key and placed it into the keyhole, turning it. Immediately, the world around him changed to the hellish dimension he was in before. Each path illuminated a certain light at the end of them. The happy tree's path showed a blood-red light, while the sad tree's path illuminated a heavenly glow. Coltstein had to think hard about this. Seeing the key showed the truth. Yet, he was in the manipulative world again, where everything he saw was a lie. The tree had said his path led to heaven, yet in this dimension, it led to hell. The manipulative world lied, meaning the fact it led to hell was not true. So Coltstein knew which tree was telling the truth. It was the happy tree. But it just seemed too easy.
Think, Coltstein. Double check before acting. This is almost too easy.
Coltstein checked his surroundings one more time, and noticed something fishy about the trees. The faces had not changed, meaning since the trees did not change, the happy tree was lying about where his path led. The key was showing him the truth. The tree just misled him.
No wonder the others don't make it. They'll all fall by the tree, and didn't notice that the tree remained the same.
Coltstein turned the key and pulled it out, sticking it into his pocket.
I know who the lying tree is. No pony else figured this out, because they were fooled by their instinct. The lying tree is the happy tree!
The happy tree laughed, but Coltstein had figured out the scheme.
Why would a tree with a happy face lie?
Simple. The key I contained tells the truth, correct? I am in a dimension where my eyes see reality. So the key shows me the truth. The other victims who were smart enough to get this far stated the obvious. Since the native world is a lie, they think that your path leads to heaven, and that the other tree's path leads to hell, the next place I need to go. It is exact opposite. Because even though the tree shows me this world, it doesn't lie what my eyes see. Your face don't change either. So if I were in the business world, your face would change. Your faces don't change either. So if I was in the business world, your faces will change. Because the world fools my eyes. That wasn't the last dimension I was in. I was the next dimension. Hell! The manipulative world was just used as a mask to fool your victims. But luckily, I double-checked my surroundings and wasn't fooled by a happy face. Therefore, your correct path is yours.
But why would you choose hell over heaven? That makes no sense.
Simple. If you are to proceed, remember well, a witch can only assist in hell. Therefore, if I wish to confront my enemy, I must travel to hell.
The tree was speechless. Coltstein had debunked the riddle, and had figured out which tree was lying.
Congratulations, Pony. You have outsmarted me. You may proceed to the next step.
Coltstein nodded as he turned down the happy tree's path to travel into the hell where Annie awaited his arrival.
One more step, Coltstein, and this madness ends forever. I'm coming for you, Annie!
The Happy Trees trail led to a much more dark and thick area of the forest, which didn't surprise Coltstein one bit, seeing the trail was supposed to lead to hell. The atmosphere of the area was heavy, much like the first area he had arrived in, causing him to struggle a little as he proceeded deeper into the uncharted territory. His flesh was scratched by the thorn bushes that grew off of the trees, causing his body to burn like fire. He didn't care if he was infected or even if he died, as long as Annie was defeated for good. After passing the uncharted area, he came to a huge opening, where he saw a hut formed from the tree it was connected to. 2 windows glue a fluorescent light from the moss-covered hut, as Coltstein took precautions walking further into the opening. He knew that Annie wasn't going to allow him easy access. Coltstein was correct, noticing a large number of walls composed of the forest plantation form all around him, along with a sinister laugh in the midst of the newly formed trap.
Did you really think it would be that easy?
No, Annie. Do you think I'm that stupid? I know how things work with monsters like you.
Well, I doubt you'll be able to pass this test, scum. This maze has never been passed by any mortal, and was designed to do so. You may have been able to pass every other test I've thrown at you, but this test is one that not even you will be able to pass.
You'd be surprised, Annie. I look forward to seeing you on the other side.
I look forward to absorbing your soul, detective.
Coltstein ignored Annie's taunting and carefully examined the area. He was in Annie's territory now, and this would be his biggest challenge yet.
This is it, Coltstein. Time to put all that knowledge to use.
Coltstein knew that he had to be prepared for anything. Annie was ruthless, so this maze was packed with traps. Coltstein proceeded with caution down the only path accessible. He came to the first turn, examining the open area carefully. Coltstein couldn't see anything of danger, but Annie was manipulative, so even the safest areas could not be trusted. The darkness made it hard to see if there was anything hiding within the walls of the passage, so Coltstein had to think hard.
Think hard, Coltstein. I cannot just go off instinct. If I go by my instinct, I end up dead, for sure.
Coltstein retraced his steps, remembering that he had a key that showed him the truth.
The key!
He exclaimed, pulling the key out.
Now, I just need a keyhole.
There's no keyhole.
Who's there?
I am the filly Sally. I can't be here long, so I must be quick. As a sign of gratitude, I leave you a word of advice, detective. The key is the answer, but how you see the truth doesn't rely on an entrance, only what remains precious. Best of luck to you, detective, and thank you for freeing me.
Coltstein could not feel the presence of Sally anymore, as he thought about what Sally had said. He was confused, but knew that Sally had not given him that information for no reason. He decided to trust Sally's advice, and immediately thought hard about the words.
The key is the answer, but how you see the truth doesn't rely on an entrance, only what remains precious.
The main part of the riddle that Coltstein focused on was only what remains precious. What was most precious to him? He cared for many things. He loved Daisy, cared deeply for Applebloom, and even though it didn't seem like it, he did care for his colleague, Cadwell. How did the key have to do with Daisy, Applebloom, or Cadwell? They were just innocent victims caught in the middle of a demon's game of chess.
Is the riddle referring to my past?
Questioned Coltstein, as he thought hard about his theory. Through his thoughts, he remembered an older memory from his Philly years. A day when he was playing a board game with his sister. Young Coltstein sat in his room, playing a strategic board game with his sister. The concept of the game was to build an army and to destroy your opponent's army. A game called Ponyville. Coltstein had a stronger Pegasus, equipped with wing armor that nearly made it impossible to kill, while Dazzling had an earth pony with a bronze sword. It was down to the final battle.
My Pegasus is clearly stronger than your Pegasus. Victory is mine!
Said Coltstein, ready to claim victory. Dazzling realized that her brother was correct, as she thought hard about all of her options.
Alright, Coltstein, I'll take my turn, and I'll start by moving my earth pony into your Pegasus magic field, which will decrease my pony's life by 10 life.
Coltstein was confused, yet satisfied, as Dazzling ended her turn.
You fool! Now I have to attack and I win!
Not exactly, little brother. You fell right into my trap. I wanted you to attack so I can activate my earth pony's ultimate special ability, Angel's Call. This ability can only be activated a turn after when my character's life is decreased by the effect of one of your creatures. My character regains life equal to the amount of life it lost times 10. My creature gains 100 life, and your creature only has 50 life. Therefore, your creature is destroyed, and I win the game.
Coltstein was shocked. He clearly had the game won, yet his older sister had pulled a bold move to win the game.
How did you do that?
Simple, little brother. I looked over all my possible options and found a way to outsmart your tactics. Sometimes, if you look at things differently, you can find a way to overcome a sticky situation.
Well, you won fair and square. So I guess I'll be doing the dishes tonight.
Coltstein's mind spiked at the thought of what Dazzling had said that day, remembering that he still had the other key. If he looked through the gem embedded in the key's grip, perhaps it would show him the right path, even though he knew that there was no safe path. Coltstein reached into his pocket and grabbed the gold key, holding it by its teeth between his hooves. He squinted his left eye shut and looked through the gem-embedded part of the grip, immediately noticing something strange. He could see what looked like a staircase drawn along the left wall of the passage, which he knew was the only safe way to pass.
I'll be damned. I can't believe that actually worked.
Coltstein felt a small boost of confidence, until he remembered he still needed to find some sort of way to trigger the staircase. He turned back to the key, staring through the gem, hoping to find what looked like some sort of keyhole. It didn't take long to find a hidden keyhole just outside of the opening to the passage. Using the key's guidance, he walked to the location of the keyhole and placed the silver key into the hidden keyhole, turning the key. Immediately, a staircase made out of concrete grew from the side of the wall, causing a motion-activated booby trap to activate. 10 poisonous daggers shot from the opposite wall and stuck into the other side of the passage.
Daggers! Perfect for defense.
Coltstein walked onto the staircase, grabbing the daggers as he did, and sticking them into his pocket. He knew that he'd need them, because the traps were far from done. Once he had made it past the first trap safely, he made his way from the staircase, only to see a long, narrow path. Coltstein already knew that this passageway was littered with dagger traps, so to find a way to trigger the trap, he used his only safe guide. He couldn't see any hidden passages through the key, even after doing a double check to make sure he had not missed anything. That's when he knew that to get past this obstacle, he'd have to run as fast as he possibly could, and hopefully not get hit by any daggers. Coltstein was pretty athletic, so he could run fast, but this was a matter of life and death, so unless he hoofed it, he'd be hit by one of the daggers for sure. Coltstein decided to do a countdown, preparing himself for the long run. It was as if he were preparing for an Olympic event, only the stakes were higher and much more dangerous.
Don't think, just run, Coltstein. 3, 2, 1, run!
Coltstein abandoned any other thoughts and quickly trotted as fast as he could down the long path, hearing the booby traps trigger. He didn't think of anything and just continued to trot, focusing on only getting to the other end of the path. He was only inches from the end of the path when he felt an agonizing pain in his right thigh. He had been struck by a dagger, causing him to falter a little, but with one final lunge, he was out of the danger zone. His right thigh burned like fire as he examined the injury, only to see a small steel blade embedded deep into where his cutie mark was located. He knew he had to get the blade out, so the poison couldn't spread any further than it already had. He groaned in pain, gripping the sharp blade and pulling it out. As he pulled the blade out, Coltstein screamed so loud that it echoed throughout the maze. Even though it was painful, Coltstein knew that the blade had to come out, so he continued to yank on the blade until it finally came out. Blood gushed from the open wound as Coltstein struggled to stand back up, noticing something at the end of the long path just in front of him. 3 creatures that looked like dogs growled at him, ready to pounce at any moment. Coltstein looked at the creatures, anger expressed on his face, as he stood back up, gripping the blade that he had just extracted from his wound.
This is what you wanted all along, isn't it? To see me weak and hurt? Is that what you wanted, Annie?
His tone was nothing but anger and rage, as he continued to stare at the creatures only 30 yards from him.
I've been through hell and back because of you. And now you're going to pay for what you cause. This is truly what you want. Then come and get me! I'm not afraid anymore, you bitch!
Coltstein watched as one of the horrendous creatures lunged toward him, ready to attack and finish him off. He continued to grip the dagger soaked with his blood, waiting for the creature to attack. Once the creature was within his reach, Coltstein thrusted the blade into the creature, hearing a yipe sound from the dog-like creature. The thrust from the blade had immediately weakened the creature, as Coltstein continued to hold the blade within the creature, pinning the monster against the wall of the maze closest to him. The blade had begun to slide up the creature, as Coltstein released all the pressure he had on the blade, making sure it was pinned into the wall well enough to hold the creature. The blade had begun to slowly slide through the creature, slicing the creature in two.
How does it feel? That's how I felt for years because of you. Torn in two!
Off of that statement, the creature's body was sliced in two, causing the other 2 creatures to retract. The poison had a strange effect on Coltstein, an effect that he enjoyed, an effect that he needed. Annie's home was in plain sight, as the infuriated Coltstein made his way down the final passageway, noticing a rusty key right at the foot of the door. Annie's door had 3 locks, so this was the key to her home. The key to her black heart. Coltstein grabbed the rusty key, placed it into the rustiest lock, the gold key into the golden lock, and the silver key into the silver lock, turning all 3 keys. The large lock fell from the wooden door to the ground, dissolving to nothing but dust. As Coltstein prepared to enter Annie's heart, the encounter he had awaited ever since the night he had ever encountered Annie.
I'm home, Annie! Let's settle this now!
Inside the hut, Coltstein saw nothing but pure horror. Along the walls of the hut were blood-stained tables with chunks of meat and flesh on them, next to bloody knives, along with a torture device designed to rip Philly and Colt's limbs clean from their bodies, placed along the wooden floor. A pentagram was outlined in the middle of the hut as well, drawn by the blood of innocent victims. But Coltstein noticed something particular about the blood. It was fresh, meaning it had recently been drawn out. Once Coltstein had finished his observation of the hut, he caught sight of an angelic pony on the far side of the room, humming a tune. He could see another pony within the torture device, silenced by something covering their mouth. The pony had something on their head, something red and very familiar. The angelic pony moved away from the device, only to reveal Apple Bloom with a nasty incision on the left side of her body. Her eyes were full of tears, and her mouth was covered by some sort of tar. She screamed in agony as the other pony placed their hoof back into the incision. Coltstein had seen enough, and he didn't need the key to show him who the angelic pony truly was. It was Annie. To catch Annie's attention, Coltstein stomped his back hoof against the wooden floor. The stomp startled Annie as she turned to face him.
Looks like I underestimated you, but your adventure ends here, Detective. Come any closer, and I'll rip her limbs from her joints.
So, this is how it is. Applebloom was right. You are a coward. You rely on dirty deeds to get what you want.
Did you think I was going to play fair? Apparently, you don't know how demons work.
I never expect you to play fair, Annie. I know how demons work. They taunt, lie, manipulate, and pull the dirtiest moves to outsmart the abbesses. However, you haven't outsmarted me. It's all thanks to your own trap that I'm the one who's going to end you!
What sort of nonsense are you speaking? You can't do anything. I've outsmarted you, and now this pathetic filly will become my new body. This body has become old, crippled, and too obvious. With Applebloom's body, I'll be able to plague this pathetic world.
I never known my own destiny, but now I do know it. It's to stop you!
Coltstein transported across the room to where Annie stood, surprising her immediately. And before she could react, Coltstein thrusted one of the daggers he had obtained into Annie's side so deep that only 2 inches of the dagger were visible outside of Annie's body. The stabbing caused Annie to collapse to the ground, as Coltstein rushed to free Applebloom from the demented device that she was trapped in. Coltstein used his newfound abilities to unlock all the locks, then lifted Applebloom from the device, turning toward the exit, hoping to escape.
You won't escape,
shouted Annie, sealing the exit using her magic. Coltstein turned back to Annie, who had managed to catch her balance again.
No pony has ever escaped, and no simple subject as you will escape me,
exclaimed Annie, lunging forward at a fast speed. Coltstein could read Annie, now that his true potential had been unlocked, and quickly dodged her, causing her to violently smack into the door. The impact had caused the entire hut to shake, as Coltstein grabbed his third dagger and stabbed Annie 5 times in her back, causing her to scream. He didn't show her no mercy and continued to stab her over and over until the blade broke, sticking it into her back. To continue his assault, Coltstein grabbed the 4th dagger and stabbed her until the blade broke. Coltstein was not holding back and continued to do the same cycle until all the daggers had broken, and Annie's back was completely covered with stab wounds, and only blood was visible. Once the stabbing was done, and enough poison was infested into Annie to kill her, Coltstein watched in his rage as Annie fell to the floor with a hard thud, screaming in pain. She was defeated at last, slowly dying in her final moments.
How does it feel to finally feel the pain and agony that I felt for years, all because of you?
You think you've won? The moment I seal that exit, I trap you to your death. This hut will collapse and you'll go with it. I'm one detective. You've lost.
Annie suddenly let out a piercing scream, causing the entire hut to shake and slowly start to collapse.
Goodbye, detective.
Taunted Annie, laughing at his false attempts. Annie had Coltstein pinned, and if he had any chance of escaping, he had to think fast. The unfolding events made it hard for him to think, along with Annie's laughter, until he spotted a book on a table starting to collapse. That's when he remembered the legend of the book he had found in Camelot Library that day. If any pony is to ever come across it, they are destined to die from their own doing. The words made him realize what he had to do now. To defeat Annie, he had to die. It was the only way to win. But he had made a promise to Daisy that he would return, and wanted to let her know that he loved her. The question was, how? Through his struggle, he heard Applebloom say something, but due to the black tar covering her mouth, it was hard to tell what she was trying to say.
Applebloom, are you trying to tell me something?
Applebloom responded by nodding her head, but if he tried to even remove the tar, it would rip her flesh clean from her jaw. Coltstein did not have to act, as Applebloom used her hoof to obtain some blood, and wrote a message along the floor. Even though it hurt her, she knew she had to repay Coltstein some way, causing Coltstein to smile. Applebloom spelled out the words, "Use me," using her own blood, immediately confusing Coltstein.
How can I use you?
Applebloom responded by touching her right ear with her right hoof, as if she were directing him toward it.
Do you want me to use your ear?
Applebloom wasted no time in nodding her head, so Coltstein acted quickly, placing his mouth near Applebloom's right ear. Daisy stood before Annie, still in full manifestation, laughing at her, and calling her every foul word she possibly could in the time of Coltstein's absence. Daisy had adapted to Annie's insults, so she just ignored the insults and continued to worry about Coltstein, due to him being gone for over an hour. Annie's insults were suddenly interrupted by a familiar voice, speaking out of Annie's mouth.
Daisy, are you there? If you dare, it's Coltstein, speaking from Annie's mind. I just wanted to say goodbye, and that I love you, even though it may not seem like it. You're the only one who believed me through this entire case, and for that, I am forever grateful. But in the end, I must die to save both Applebloom and you. It was sealed in stone. Ever since that night that I encountered Annie for the first time. For me, for Applebloom, be sure to get this footage of this accident to the media. It's the only way to prove Applebloom is innocent and to free her from the facility. I love you, and always will. Goodbye, Daisy.
The message ended, and Annie fell to silence. Daisy knew that that was Coltstein, and that he was not kidding about anything he said. She felt tears enter her eye sockets, trying to think of any possible solution.
There has to be a way to save him. It can't end like this. No more lives can be lost.
Her mind fell to one solution as she grabbed a camera from its stand and cast the spell that she had cast on Coltstein to enter Annie's mind, causing her to enter the mind of Annie, hoping to save Coltstein and Applebloom. Just like Coltstein, Daisy landed on the outskirts of the forest. She stood from the hard ground, surprised that the camera was still working. She was confused on where to go next, until she heard a child's voice.
If you wish to save them, come with me.
Daisy was scared as she questioned the voice.
Who are you? Where are you?
Down here.
Daisy looked down with the camera, only to see a young female filly standing on her hooves. She was both frightened, yet comfortable at the same time. She could see this was a harmless spirit, as she spoke out.
Who are you, dear?
My name is Sally. The one you seek saved me from the darkness.
He did?
Yes, we must hurry if you wish to save him. Due to Annie being weak, I can get you to your destination fast. Just grab my hoof and I'll take you to him.
Daisy trusted Sally, so she grabbed Sally's hoof and was surprised, as she was immediately transported to the outside of Annie's hut.
He's in there.
Daisy trotted to the door, attempting to open it, but the knob would not budge. She panicked, turning back to Sally.
How do I get in?
You know magic, right? One good magic blast should do it.
I haven't done magic like that for years. I doubt I could even budge it.
Sally shook her head.
Do you love them?
More than anything.
Then don't think, just do.
But
Don't think!
Daisy grew angry and charged up as much magic as she could. She didn't focus on her target and fired a massive beam of magic, hitting the side of the hut. She caused tons of damage to the hut, until she finally made her aim back to the door, blasting it from its hinges. The blast surprised Coltstein from the inside, as Daisy ran into the hut and shouted out for Coltstein. Coltstein stood up, surprised to see Daisy.
Daisy? What the hey are you doing here?
Saving you!
Coltstein looked angry as he responded back.
Daisy, I have to die to kill Annie. If I leave, she will escape.
Daisy shook her head.
There has to be another way. I can't lose you. Not like this.
Coltstein's eyes bulged, starting to leak small tears. Daisy continued to speak.
I know this may seem like the only way, but there must be another way to end this madness without another life being lost.
What other way is there?
Use that big brain of yours to find another way.
Coltstein thought hard about any other possibility, then remembered the memory of him and Dazzling playing the game. Dazzling's words applied to the situation. Annie was the Pegasus, and he was the Earth Pony. He had to think from a different angle to win Annie's demented game of chess.
Think, Coltstein!
Suddenly, he remembered back to what the blade soaked with his blood had done to the dog-like creature. Could mortal blood be the key? Just like in the game, he'd have to give something up to gain victory. Coltstein's mind spiked as he turned to Daisy.
Find something sharp for me. I believe I know how to beat her.
Daisy quickly scrambled around for any sharp objects, immediately noticing a large shard of glass among the clutter. She quickly grabbed it and gave it to Coltstein.
Hold Applebloom for me.
Daisy took Applebloom from Coltstein, handing Coltstein the glass shard.
What are you going to do?
Give Annie her kiss of death. Applebloom, this is going to sting, but I cannot use my own blood, so I need you to be strong.
Applebloom nodded her small head as Coltstein made a deep cut into Applebloom's front right hoof. Applebloom jolted as blood started to leak from her wound. To catch the blood, Coltstein started sucking blood from the wound like a vampire. Coltstein hated to do this, but he needed lots of blood to put Annie to rest forever. So he continued to suck until his mouth was full of the taste of iron. He didn't enjoy the taste, but he had to deal with it as he turned toward Annie. Annie looked at him, weak, as Coltstein leaned down and quickly silenced Annie by putting his mouth to hers, spitting all of Applebloom's blood into her mouth. Annie attempted to break from him, but Coltstein held himself to her, making sure that all of the blood was extracted. Once he was sure that the blood was in Annie's mouth, he pulled away and cramped Annie's mouth shut to prevent her from spitting out the poison. He even cut off her nostrils so she couldn't breathe.
Didn't think I figured it out. This is your own weakness. The blood of a mortal.
He had to get her to swallow it, so he sat her up and violently thrusted her head back, giving her no choice but to swallow it or choke. She attempted to fight in his hooves, but Coltstein was clearly stronger, due to Annie having tons of wounds and large amounts of poison in her bloodstream compared to Coltstein.
Daisy, I need help!
Daisy sat Applebloom down gently and quickly rushed to his aid.
What do I need to do?
I need you to give her a nudge. One stab should do it.
Daisy had the glass shard that Coltstein had used, so she quickly acted by stabbing Annie in the stomach. Annie was stubborn, refusing to give in, so Daisy attempted another stab just above the abdominal area, but once again failed. Daisy went for another stab attempt, but was surprised as Annie broke free from Coltstein's grip and created a force strong enough to push Coltstein and Daisy into the walls of the hut.
Enough! It's time to finish you, pests!
Coltstein and Daisy's impacts had hurt both of them badly, so they couldn't recover to defend themselves, as Annie picked up a large, sharp metal shard and prepared to thrust it into Coltstein.
You might have weakened me, but I still have enough strength for one final kill. Welcome to the family, detective.
She taunted, lunging the metal object toward Coltstein. Coltstein saw his life flash before his eyes as the metal shard grew closer and closer. He saw his family, Dazzling, Applebloom, and all of the ponies he had failed to protect as he prepared to enter Annie's family of tortured souls. Just as the shard was about to impact him, Annie was stopped by something. She choked as a shard of glass was thrusted through her neck, causing her to drop the metal shard and fall in defeat. The shard of glass remained in place as Applebloom appeared from behind Annie's neck. Annie could not speak as Applebloom pulled out the shard, then swung it like a sword, severing Annie's head from her shoulders.
Son of a bitch! She actually did it.
The tar covering Applebloom's mouth dissolved, and immediately she spoke out in her victory.
Stay away from me and my friends!
She commanded, jumping from Annie's lifeless body and landing on Annie's severed head, shattering like glass. The shards from Annie's head dissolved to nothing but dust as Applebloom ran to Daisy and Coltstein's aides.
You okay, Doctor?
I've been better. Let's get out of here. I'm tired of this place.
You think you are.
Applebloom and Coltstein laughed as Daisy helped herself up, continuing to film the entire thing. Coltstein, Daisy, and Applebloom took their leave, sealing the exit, so Annie had no possibility of escape. Outside the hut, the maze was gone, and all that remained was a beautiful forest, now that the evil had been removed. Above them, tons of white auras filled the sky, each heading toward a large portal.
Looks like we're not the only ones getting out.
All three of them smiled as the spirit of a young filly appeared before them. Coltstein immediately recognized the filly as the one that Annie had forced to commit suicide. She was finally free to go.
Are you ready to go?
All three nodded their heads, so the spirit held out a hoof.
Take my hoof, and we can all go.
All three of them did not hesitate, and quickly placed their hooves on the spirits.
To freedom we go!
Concluded the spirit, lifting all of them into the air, toward the portal that would lead them back to where each of them belonged. Coltstein could finally rest, knowing that the ponies he had failed to protect were now at peace, and a great feat of justice had been served. He could sleep again, knowing that the same nightmare was no longer awaiting him.
Peace and harmony. At long last, I have found you.
It didn't take long for Applebloom's innocence to be proven after the media got a hold of the footage from the exorcism. She was released the next day, courtesy of Coltstein himself. However, it wasn't the footage of the exorcism that became the talk of Ponyville, but what happened within the Canterlot morgue. Patients Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle miraculously came back to life not long after Coltstein, Daisy, and Applebloom had returned from Annie's mind. Coltstein laughed when he read the story about Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle returning from the dead, even though he knew how they truly came back. They were freed, just like the other countless souls of victims that Annie had stolen for her own power. Knowing that innocent victims had regained their lives made Coltstein happy, even though it was Applebloom who had freed them by killing Annie. That was one thing he could never take credit for, despite his reputation. As for Coltstein, he, along with Daisy, retired after one of the most compelling cases ever documented in the Canterlot case files. Coltstein had seen enough death in his time as a detective, and now that he knew justice had been served, he could retire in peace. The Apple family remains in contact with Coltstein and still ask him for weekly sessions with Applebloom, which is one thing he could accept as a friend to the Apple family, along with Daisy. Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle made full recoveries and continued to crusade with Applebloom, even though, not long after her encounter with Annie, Applebloom earned her cutie mark, a shield that represented her bravery and strength in the face of danger. Applebloom had saved Equestria from what could have been a horrible future. She was the hero, not Coltstein, and Coltstein accepted that. He never wished to be rewarded for anything, and was happy, knowing that all of Annie's victims were free and at peace. 1 year after the Unmarked case was solved, Coltstein and Daisy finally tied the knot, and not long after the wedding, Daisy ended up pregnant with a baby boy. Both of them agreed on a name that suited both of them combined: Bolden. Daisy and Coltstein both had bold hearts, and despite the odds, always found a way to triumph over every obstacle in the end. Coltstein and Daisy decided to live out in the country, where they would never be bothered by any pony, except for the friends that knew the location. Coltstein and Daisy have been at peace for 3 years, having visits from the Apple family every so often, along with Coltstein continuing his sessions with Applebloom. The couple could not be happier, but one thing still bugged Coltstein, something he remembered from his time in Annie's mind. Coltstein sat on his porch swing, admiring the view of the beautiful landscape, remembering his time in Annie's mind. Daisy joined him, handing him a cup of coffee in his favorite mug.
Here's your coffee.
Thanks.
He replied, taking the coffee from Daisy.
Something wrong?
I know it's been 3 years, but there's still one thing about the Unmarked case that I can't understand. The effect of that potion had on me. It made me remember something that I can't ever recall in my life, even though it's true that I never knew what my cutie mark represents when it appeared at some nightmare night party.
What happened at the party?
I'm not sure. Me, along with some other friends, decided to go out looking for ghosts. But the strange thing is, I don't remember anything about that night. I remember waking up the next morning, and every pony was staring at me with strange looks. My cutie mark was there as well, so I sometimes wonder if my destiny was connected to the paranormal.
Annie couldn't possess me, no matter how hard she tried. And the poison from the dagger made me more powerful than a demon. So I wonder, am I real, or am I a spirit of some sort, sent here to help rid of this world of demons? Am I a powerful spirit in pony form?
After all I've seen, I wouldn't put it aside, but it doesn't matter. All that matters is who you think you are.
I'm just any other pony, and I prefer to keep it that way, because as long as I have you, nothing can ever make me think otherwise.
I agree.
replied Daisy, kissing her beloved, as the sun fell below the horizon and Luna's moon rose into the night sky.